Hello everybody, this is going to be a different type of video that I do today, one that is more in lieu of the spirit of the holidays, as well as just being a way for me to catch up on my upload quota for this year. I am taking it upon myself every Saturday this December to bring you a sort of like podcast type video, just so I can like kind of train in myself for these sort of like rambly videos in case I want to like keep doing them in the future. But in all fairness, it's just so I can have a little bit of fun making videos, again, because I really miss doing this type of stuff. But yeah, so today marks, well, not today, but this year marks this one of my favorite video game companies as of late's 30th anniversary, that being Treasure Ltd. So the game that's currently playing on screen is one Gunstar Heroes, released back in 1993 for the Sega Genesis, later getting ported to plenty of home consoles, including the Nintendo Switch very recently. One thing that really needs to be paid attention with this company is that that's pretty much made up of ex-Konami employees, or at the very least is made up of people who first worked on the Contra games, which can be observed through this game's gameplay style and its core functions, because as a side-scrolling sort of run-and-gun shooter, I should mention the Contra influence is definitely, you know, out there for better, mostly for better. But one of the biggest strengths to Treasure Ltd as a whole is in how they are able to simultaneously weave in different like shoot 'em up elements into different genres, different subgenres of shooters. Like the very first ever shoot 'em up game the first pure shoot 'em up game they ever made would be debatably in 1998 with the release of Radiant Silvergun, but the influence from their predecessors, it cannot be overstated. It's simply immaculate how fast and frantic some of their games can become, and Gunstar Heroes using that power on the Genesis is a pure example of this through and through. So, one of the big core elements of Gunstar Heroes that I'd say is how it develops its different weapon systems. And this is going to come up later in terms of like variety and whatnot. It allows for plenty of different play styles within the gameplay, so that way you're not just shooting at one spot or another. Like I did right there, I swapped them between the arrow ones, which home in on enemies, and this fire one, which hits close range and does pretty much the most damage from what I've seen so far. Keep in mind, this is also developed right next to Treasure's one of Treasure's other Sega Genesis games, McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure, or whatever it's called. I don't fucking know. But these were developed pretty much simultaneously, since they were like about the year after Treasure had formed as a company. So you could tell just how much like work and effort was put into like making sure this game presented itself well on the Genesis hardware. Like it looks really phenomenal in terms of like sprite-based graphics, and I don't think my gameplay is gonna do it any favors, honestly. Oh, another thing about this game, one of the core aspects, the different like weapon that you can nab and like start off with in the game, you can actually mix and match those a bit for some really interesting combinations, such as like there's this one that like sort of fired a beam into the enemy, and it just like constantly fires over. I don't know if that was like just an electricity effect or anything, but it was nice. It felt like a, but definitely like one of these like mix and match abilities as well was kind of like this like fire dragon thing that just like shot a fire trail like straight, and it like kind of weaved around, and you can see that in a lot of games that can end up like doing pretty big favors for your own playstyle as a whole. And I think that's one of Treasure's like biggest qualities as a developer, is that the fast and frantic gameplay also like helps out in choosing your own playstyle as a result of that. And also, in terms of like influence, Gunstar Heroes also is probably one of the like flagship titles for Treasure as a whole, mainly because you can see the influence it shares for so many other games as a whole, such as like Ultra Kill. Just in this scene alone, this pyramid slide was probably was a big influence for the developers for this boss fight of a similar nature, which I won't get into spoilers here, but there's another game you can play, Ultra Kill. But another big thing about this game comes in the form factor. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. In essence, like, Treasure's whole philosophy of having games that are that play well over ones that can rope in a wide audience and get tons of sales is one that that I feel is something we desperately need in the games industry right now. One that I feel would be beneficiary, but also at the same time something for other companies to consider, since they're practically allowed it with stuff like Sega and Nintendo giving them funds just to do whatever kind of insane, like, fast-paced gameplay they want. And it's really a sight to behold for some of them. Like, Gunstar Heroes is one of the Genesis's, like, ace-in-the-hole titles, and it shows in, like, so many ways, despite being, like, one of their shortest games. It's a real quality title. You know, for a while now, Sega was always like Treasure's biggest holder for Treasure's most beloved titles. Even on the stuff like the Sega Saturn, which debatably didn't have a whole lot of a library, especially over in the West, which is a crying shame, since like half of the titles being relegated to the Japanese market probably played a big hand in it eventually being shafted by the US altogether. It's seen tenfold in its sales, but one of their big titles, one of the like landmark titles in my opinion, that never made it to the West was 100% Radiant Silvergun. It says a lot about Treasure that they're just now making a top-down shoot-'em-up game and excelling at it tenfold because of how they use their influence from other shoot-'em-up games to their advantage. Like you see it so much in like some of their earlier stuff, such as Alien Soldier, which also somehow didn't end up in the US due to it being only relegated in to the Sega Channel in the US, while Europeans got this cartridge format. But I'll stop ranting about that now. But one of Radiant Silvergun's biggest strengths, when considering that it's a shoot 'em up of its time is that it promotes a lot of variety in its weaponry and moveset. In total, I think there's about like 6 different weapons at your disposal. At least from what I can tell. One of the big ones being this diagonal shot, which shoots twice in both directions, diagonally towards places in front of you that you wouldn't be able to otherwise get with your frontal shot. Unlike most shoot 'em ups, which just let you fire straight ahead, sometimes even like backwards. Radiant Silvergun just gives you this all you can eat buffet of different weapons to take down enemies, such as that green careening shot, which deals less damage as a result of it, like, you know, homing in on enemies, but also, you know, allows you to hit places you wouldn't otherwise get to with your normal front shot. And then I'm guessing you noticed this little gauge at the top left, which you probably like saw get incremented by these like pink particles, and that all lies in probably my favorite weapon to use in this game so far. This sword absorber weapon. It's not really like a deflector or anything, but it's one that when you come into contact with a pink particle from like an enemy shot or whatnot, you can use that sword to sort of like slice through it and build up this gauge, which when filled up, when you press the sword, like the sword button again, it allows you in the like a couple second time frame to just like sweep everything in front and back of you, while also staying invulnerable at the same time. These pink particles also like allow me to transition into one of this game's other strengths. The fact that it's mainly a 2D game with 3D type elements, such as like the some of the foreground stuff, some of the background stuff, as well as the incredible boss designs are all rendered in 3D, while the main enemies and the ship itself is rendered in 2D, which, if you know anything about the Saturn's hardware, you'd know that it was mainly made as a 2D machine first and foremost. And if any case, it's sort of like souped up Sega CD in that case, only, you know, with a more reserved and, you know, deep cut library as a result. But in that sort of regard, since Radiant Silvergun plays so hard, plays so well into its shoot 'em up type gameplay, it also has another big strength in its replayability. You see, this game does in fact have an end, just like, you know, all other most other shoot 'em ups do, and because of that, it also carries around a shorter length. But in that same time frame, it's sort of like one of the most difficult shoot 'em ups as a result. And because of this, Treasure's philosophy in this game is that the more you play, not only will you get to like memorize the bosses and areas a lot easier as a result, but also you actively gain a lot more in terms of lives as a result, making it so that way the more you play it, the more you're actually rewarded and motivated to keep going and get better at the game itself. It's this like sort of Sonic the Hedgehog type of deal, where like replays of the game that like allow you to get better at it also make playing the game a lot more fun as a result. And that is a very niche crowd that Treasure Limited as a whole has managed to squeeze practically like every little bit out of, and for good reason as well. Best part is that crowd hasn't gone away anytime soon. As of when the Xbox first came about back in, like, I want to say 2010, that the Radiant Silver Gun got ported to it as a result, and it was the first time it ever came over to the West outside of, you know, like, emulation. And why, just like this year, it also got announced in a Nintendo Direct that Radiant Silver Gun was coming to the Switch like the day of, only for it to not be in the eShop and just get sold like a week later due to ratings conflicts. But that didn't stop sales like whatsoever. It got its market pretty well, and its quality definitely shows. Definitely want to pick that up whenever you can. So this next title is a very, very special title that I hold very dearly to my heart. So I'm just gonna rant about it for a little bit. This is Sin and Punishment, Earth's successor. At least that's the subtitle that it holds in Japan. Over in the West, it's just called Sin and Punishment, released back in 2000, the very millennium for the Nintendo 64. Only got its initial release in Japan, but I'm just gonna say this right now. This game fucks. This game is where I feel that Treasure definitely stepped into the reins of its own. It showed just like it's a demonstrably like incredible showcase of just how well they managed to use their influences for a game that feels so unique in both its premise and its gameplay as a whole that it became probably one of Nintendo's like landmark publishing feats, especially for the console itself. Like this thing, I'd say it compares similarly to how like the Sega Genesis was to the Super Nintendo, where while it lacked a bit in like features such as like the compact disc, it more than made up for it in pure CPU power, defining a lot of the games that it holds by just how like graphically intact it feels. Like it manages a solid 30 FPS throughout its runtime, at least in like actual console hardware, without basically like skipping a beat. Like that is unheard of, and in the long run, like Treasure had to make a lot of compromises in order to fulfill that vision, and what we ended up getting was an art style for a game that not only like looked the part of its own concept art, but also became something unique even for Nintendo's own you know, first party titles, and something that I feel that Nintendo might not ever try to step forward with again as a result. But enough about how, like, you know, 64 bits and whatnot. How does the gameplay fare? Well, in short, Sin and Punishment is a rather fast and furious type of game. This thing pulls like no punches, especially in its later half, where it sort of turns into this hodgepodge of like hack and slash and shoot 'em up time gameplay, all confined by a rail shooter type movement. You got your like standard like dodges and jumps and whatnot, and it's also unique in a way that this game was actually specifically designed for the Nintendo 64 controller in a way that I feel like it actively is degraded by modern technologies in a way. But okay, hear me out here. So the Nintendo 64 is well known for having its three prongs, this little alien hand controller, but Sin and Punishment does away with like the right hand style controller where you got your left on the control stick and your right on the B and A and C buttons there. instead opting for a left-handed style play where the L's like the jump button, the Z fires away, and the D-pad actually like moves your character around. And honestly, the minute you get used to it, you'll never want to fucking play this on like anything else. As a result, it feels like it was made specifically for this controller, and it became a massive like development like struggle as a result to actually conform to the Nintendo 64's hardware, which I heard the game was basically like first like pitched back in like 1996, and was basically made as a Japanese exclusive launch simply because like it was a little too late where it would be competing with so much of Nintendo's other stuff, because of the Nintendo 64 disk drive's cancellation. But I'm here to tell you this right now, that this is one of the Nintendo 64's like landmark titles. It may or the like, but in a way it sort of like surpasses that simply because of how well polished the 3D gameplay is. This sort of really edgy, somewhat like really hard to like process game. And believe me, it's hard as hell. Once you actually like get used to the main controls, it becomes like almost sublime. Like you're like in direct contact with Saki, the main player character, in like pretty much everything he does. Speaking of which, this game actually has a story for once in a treasure title. Not really a first, since plenty of treasure titles had a lot of like cinematics in their game titles, but I think Sin and Punishment does it in a way that like it's not necessarily like not confusing in some areas, but one that I feel like directly integrates it along with the gameplay in a way that feels satisfying enough, but doesn't super break the pace of it as a result. So basically, this new population of like animal called ruffians was created in the humanity's near future, which is the year 2007, which incidentally ended up being when the game got released on the Wii's Virtual Console service. The ruffians were created sort of as a way to circumvent world hunger during the time, and these creatures ended up becoming rapidly populating and causing death amongst the population. And Saki's basically there to stop the swarm and these agents, which make up a lot of like the game's moving parts, or the enemies, sort of. And while the story isn't really a strong suit, like I said before, it's mainly just to like help integrate the main reason why you're even fighting in the first place. Like deep diving into the story might serve a different purpose. I don't know. I haven't dived into it myself. I barely even paid attention to it in the first place. But it's one that's serviceable for the game, and one that I feel like other like other shoot 'em up devs could possibly like take a note of in the near future. But enough about that. One of this game's like defining legacy features, I'd say, is its inevitable inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Through Super Smash Bros. Brawl back in 2008, when Saki, the game's main protagonist, was included not as a main fighter, but as a assist trophy in that game, where you can summon him and he'd take like pot shots at the enemies and just like do his own thing before he pissed off. And recently the game got on Switch thanks to the Switch Online expansion pack, which allowed for Nintendo 64 games to be played as a result. So just go play it there, I guess. So this next one, just like its predecessor, is easily one of my favorite games of all time, and honestly, probably my all-time favorite shoot 'em up game, Sin and Punishment Star Successor, created for the Nintendo Wii after the stunning success of Sin and Punishment's release on the Wii's home console. Treasure decided to follow it up after realizing that, yes, people want more of this, and ended up making probably one of the quintessential games for the Wii. I know I've said this a lot for their pretty much every game on this list, but this one, I cannot stress this enough. You need to play this fucking game in order if you got a Wii. Especially if you got one of them fancy old Wii remotes, you know, it's just a little something that, you know, every single Wii console owns, you know. But in Sin and Punishment Star Successor's case, they managed to find a way to make it so that Wii remote aiming became quintessential to success in this game. Like, back when the game was first being developed for, the Treasure developers had first crafted it for the classic controller and whatnot. But whenever like playtesters had came in, I don't know if it was like Miyamoto or Wada or whatnot, when they came in to try out one of the levels, they had pulled up with a Wii remote in hand, just pointing and aiming at the sensor bars, just like, what are you talking about? This is too easy. And like compared to the original Sin and Punishment, they had to rectify that just by having a aiming system that, or a level design that went hand in hand with a Wii remote. You pretty much played with any other controller, and you were dead in the dirt on arrival. That's how important it was, and it honestly came out for the better because, in short, Star Successor makes brilliant use of that precision aiming, and I'd say it had a massive effect on both both the game's difficulty as well as like just its overall presentation. As even though like the power of the Wii itself was mainly had to do with its previous iteration of the GameCube, since it didn't really change much in technology, even with the added widescreen, it manages to pull off a lot of new noteworthy things in terms of hardware regardless, just because of that skip in hardware. You can see that pretty much like anywhere in the game, from like the character models of Issa and Kachi respectively, to stuff like the game's environments. They look amazing, practically like graphically Treasure's best for sure. And the game not only like has that feel of like more precision-based aiming over Sin and Punishment, but also has a lot more going on as a result of the advance in hardware. You got like a whole slew of different play styles, like a run and gun type of deal. And then at certain points of the game, you even just start flying out of nowhere, which allows you to just like careen through the air, which is something that I believe the Sin and Punishment devs want to do at some point or another, because of the little plateau sections of that game as well, while you're playing as Iron. So you know, they definitely have that in the banks at some point. So I'm very glad they got to do at least a little bit of that. Which also means you can hover during ground segments as well, but it's a lot more like reserved for those areas as well. The boss fights in this game, let me just say this much: if you thought Sin and Punishment, if you thought any of the like previous games bosses were absolutely batshit, you're in for a hell of a ride either way for Star Successor. There's like a boatload of gimmicks that'll keep you basically on the edge of your seat at all times. Like, they don't mess around. It took me like a good while to beat like one of the main game end bosses. So, well, obviously that doesn't really come from doesn't come from a like die-hard perspective. It's just one thing that a lot of casual players are going to have to look out for, because you know, they managed to make the most use out of like their like previous level gimmicks, like such here, where you have to shoot down these pillars right here in order to weaken the boss. I honestly, I wasn't able to do it here, but once you do, it's like crack. you never want to put it down. It was very hard for me to stop playing this game once I you know, got the swing of things. And you could say that for a lot of like Treasures games. They have such a unique flavor of shoot 'em up with every title. Some of them they don't even like do shoot 'em ups at all. Not even counting like Ikaruga or whatnot, that basically had a stranglehold on the game industry for the time they were out for. All of this to say, thank you, Treasure. Thank you to all the devs out there who are putting in